All right, welcome back to Incorporate, the podcast for business owners presented by the UB School of Management Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership, where we explore the real challenges and smart strategies behind building sustainable businesses. I'm your host, Susan Steffen, Executive Director of UB Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership, and I'm joined as always by our producer, Jordan Lima of Lemur Studios. Today's episode is different. We're not just talking about strategy, we're talking about family. And when family and business intersect, the conversations can get complicated really quickly. Multi-generation businesses are the backbone of many communities, Buffalo included, but when family and business intersect, the stakes are high. Issues around succession planning, ownership transition, governance, and even interpersonal conflict can make or break a company's future. So I'm joined today by two guests who work closely with family businesses navigating these challenges. I have Joe Manna. He's an attorney with Lipsitz, Scime, Cambria, where he has helped many family-owned companies work through really complex legal issues. And Alan Pawlowski is president of Pace Management and a CEL executive in residence. He facilitates our Mastery Forum, which includes many family business owners, and he works extensively on succession planning, leadership development, and mentoring next-generation leaders. So if you're part of a family business or thinking about your legacy, this conversation is you. Welcome. What do you guys think? You ready to have a good conversation and get into some of these difficult topics, right?
We're ready. Thanks for having us.
We are.
All right, Joe, let me start with you. What makes family business uniquely rewarding and also uniquely challenging?
Sure. I mean, what I'd like to start with is, yes, I am a lawyer and I do a lot of business work and litigation work, but I'm also what's called a family business governance consultant, where I help families with different problems that we all know that they have associated with just being in business together with family. So one of the things that I do is I help them with communication problems, succession problems, real nettlesome things that come up that don't come up outside or in an ordinary business, let's say. And so I actually become, and what's very rewarding for me is I become an ally to everyone in the family to help them overcome and deal with the communication problems that they sometimes have and sticky issues that they sometimes have, like you mentioned, Susan, succession, for example, when maybe the patriarch or the matriarch, whoever owns the business, is having a hard time letting go and passing it to their children. Those are the types of things that I come in and help with through conversation and communication.
Alan, let me ask you, why do so many businesses delay succession planning or having these governance conversations?
I think it's avoidance. Many times, as Joe mentioned, the matriarch or patriarch just doesn't want to address the nearing of the next chapter in their life. They've many times worked decades, their entire life on creating something. They really do not want to get to the point of having to contemplate and plan the exit from what is so important to them and equal to, in many ways, to their children. And leaving this child behind. It's really many times what I see, avoidance. Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, it many times is avoidance, and business owners are very good at building businesses. And so they often think that they're indispensable to the business, and it's hard, they have a hard time letting go and thinking that their children or their relatives can actually do as good a job as they can do. And they don't want, as Alan said, they don't want anything bad to happen to their baby. So they have a hard time stepping back at times. There's other business owners that understand that they can contribute to the success of the business by slowly stepping back, by letting other family members step in, and they take steps in order to ensure that there's a smooth transition. But by and large, you see family business owners who don't want to step away. They have a difficult time doing that.
It's very emotional. It's very emotional many, many times.
Well, and it feels to me like there's sometimes a tendency to, some of these conversations are uncomfortable, right? You're talking about when are you going to step down or what happens if something happens to you. And even the younger generation seem like they don't want to raise those and then have awkward conversations because they've got to see you for dinner on Sunday or you're getting together for Thanksgiving or something. And it feels like there's never a good time, right? They just keep kicking that can down the road. I'll ask Dad about that later, or I'll talk to my brother, next month or something like that. But it feels like those things just fester.
They do, and children don't want to be perceived as trying to push out mom or dad. They don't want to be looked at as being greedy, being ungrateful. But they also recognize, hey, we have to have a plan. Really, two plans. You have to have the first plan you have to have in place is what happens in the event of a catastrophe to the matriarch or to the patriarch. And then you have to have a more long-term plan where let's hope that nothing like that catastrophic happens, but then if hopefully that doesn't happen, but then how do we lead into the next 5, the next 10, the next 15 years? Those are important conversations to have. And there's a lot of emotion that's built into those conversations by everybody, by the matriarch, the patriarch, the children, the other family members. There's a lot of dynamics that exist in a family business that don't exist in a non-family business. When you have a disagreement at work, you go home and you have dinner, at your table with your family. It's a different family,
right? Than your work family, yes.
But in a family business, you could have a disagreement at work, and you find yourself at the holiday table with those same people, and those business issues can come up and cause discord.
Secondary to avoidance, I've seen in multi-sibling families, sometimes some of the children don't want or maybe shouldn't be the heir apparents to the business. And the matriarch or patriarch has a tough decision on how to handle who should get the business, how should I get the business, what's a structure that I can equitably transfer the business to the one that wants it or is qualified for it, as compared to the ones that don't want it or aren't qualified for it. So it becomes a lack of awareness of possible structures and scenarios. And I think that's where a lot of help can be provided, just creating options where people can say, okay, so I can give it to just one kid, and what does that look like for the other 3 kids? Creating structural options.
You're trying to do what's best for your business, but you also want to be fair to all your children
Correct.
or whatever relatives that you have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of structures that'll cover that.
I'm sort of laughing inside at how professionally and eloquently you're talking about this because through the CEO program, I've been around a lot of family businesses, and I feel like I'm not an expert at it, but I've seen so much. Yeah. And the way that you're tactfully handling this must be the way you have to approach it with your clients too. 100%. But I've seen some stuff go down.
Yes, we
and
have.
It's tough. You do have to deal with major emotions. Yeah. I mean, I love my family very much. I wouldn't want to have a business with them because, I like loving them the way I do, and if we had to have a work disagreement, that would be very difficult to navigate. So, the work you're doing, oh boy, it's some heavy lift sometimes.
Yeah.
One of the best ways to try to avoid those types of scenarios is in my field of family business governance, there's different rooms that we have for different conversations. It's called the 4-room model, and you'll have ownership decisions that take place in the ownership room, and only owners are allowed to be in that room. And then you'll have a family room where family problems or family issues are dealt with, and you'll have a management room where management issues are dealt with. And one of the things that I try to do is help people understand that there's a governance system for the family that can be put in place to help manage this type of strife and conflict, so that the appropriate discussions take place at the appropriate time and in the appropriate place. I had a couple children of a business owner tell me that their father often waited till the middle of a Bills game after after they've had a few drinks and he had none to tackle issues, so that the sons were sometimes off guard when they were handling business issues, and Dad knew going in, this is what I'm going to do and when I'm going to do it. So that's an inappropriate way.
That's during tactics.
Yeah. It's an inappropriate way to do it, to handle a business problem. But in families, we often deal with each other within your family in a way that you wouldn't deal with non-family members. And so that's one of the most difficult things about family businesses.
This I don't need to, or I don't mean to. I'm not trying to inflate the value of what you do. I think it's just a natural statement or question. Are there any businesses that navigate this well on their own? Like, do people really they really knocked it out of the park? The family had no problems at all, or would most benefit from some type of consultation, whether it be entering a program like CEL or engaging with experts like you? Can really anyone who's in a family business benefit from this?
I mean, what do you think, Alan?
I would think so, at minimum from a tax point of view, right, and structural point of view, because I don't think any person that's an expert in XYZ business is going to know the various structures that can maximize the transference of the business for the longevity of the business and the best possibility of success post-transition. There's structural and tax implications for anything like this. It's beyond the scope of most people that own the business.
So even if
an absolute yes.
Yeah, even if the emotions are in check and people can navigate
Great communication, right? But they
Yeah.
just don't know. They're not professionals at this. This
Okay.
is what they do every day, and they need the advice of third parties.
And I would say that I agree with Alan on tax issues and legal issues, but even in very well-functioning family businesses, there are little, I call them seeds of discord, that are underlying things, and they just haven't quite surfaced yet. So if you have, matriarch or patriarch running the business, and you have children in maybe their 30s or their 40s, those children are thinking about succession and how is this going to work and who is going to lead, who is going to own. And they often have a hard time having those conversations with mom or dad or both mom and dad. Those things are there, though, and they need to be addressed in a transparent, polite, and thoughtful way, because when you have expectations as a family member in a family business, and if those expectations are either not met or completely unaddressed, that's what really harms the family in the long term. So those things are almost always at play, even when the family's getting along great.
Joe, did you tell the story about the brother pushing the sister off the bed? Is that you? Tell this story. This is a great scenario.
I did. I was working with a brother and a sister in a business, and then we were talking about separately, because many times I'll meet separately with the different family members and then together, and we'll try to find areas where we can align and where there's discord, how we can smooth that out. But we were handling a business issue. And the sister said to me, "Do you know, when I was 8 years old, he pushed me out of bed and I fell and I have a scar." And she showed me the scar on her forehead, from when she was 8 or 9 years old. And at that time, she was in her 40s. And we're talking about
long memory.
Yeah, long memory
because of this.
Right. So you just don't have those things in a family or in a non-family business, right?
Well, I'm having this funny parallel because we do a lot of recruiting videos over here. And one of the sort of cliche things to say was people saying, our business is like a family. And it's like, do you really want that? If you knew what a family business is like, no, you don't really want that. Yeah.
Not always a good thing. Yeah. So, Joe, I want to go back to the legal issues, okay? So we talked about the fact that family businesses have some unique stuff to deal with. What are those from a legal perspective? Like, what comes up?
Well, to be candid, I'm not handling those. I think Alan handles those more than I do. I'm handling the relationship side of these types of things. So, but you do have succession issues. Who's going to own? How much are they going to own? Who's going to lead? Who's going to manage? And as we said earlier, people want to be fair to their children. And so sometimes people are put in place that ought not be in place. And sometimes you can remedy that just by a conversation. But in terms of how to transition a business from one generation to another generation on the legal side of things, I think that's more Alan and another specialty.
Yeah.
And, yes, in conjunction with people like Matt Morey at your office who do the actual legal documents that will support the decision. But getting what does success look like for all the parties involved, and creating a macro structure, back to what I was saying to Jordan, creating that structure that says this is going to be the president, this is going to be the vice president, this is going to be the 3 children that aren't involved in the business, but they're going to have a trust that's going to take care of it because the business is going to sell for full market value, right? Those kind of macros we can come to, and structural things, taxation things, we can come to broad stroke agreement on, then it becomes codified by full-blown lawyers, obviously, and specialized tax accountants.
There's a lead up to that, though, Susan, and the lead up is what are the conversations with the family on how they want to handle things, and to get everybody to buy in. When sister hears that her brother is going to lead the business and he's going to maybe be a majority shareholder, there's issues there that need to come out and need to be discussed in a transparent way so that when you do put the legal documents in play, there's already been buy-in and there's a smooth transition. Because if a business owner just imposes his or her will on their children, that can cause a lot of problems.
Good luck with that one.
So you got to have the family members buy in.
Alan, let's talk a little bit about what agreements, like what are the documents we should have in place as a family business. Obviously, we need, to Joe's point, we need to talk through what we want this to look like. But then what do we have to go talk to our lawyers or specialists to have actually in place?
Yep. So there's an asset or stock transfer agreement, the actual agreement that transacts the stocks or assets back and forth between the parties. Many times a stock purchase, right, in family businesses. But an operating agreement also that defines sort of everybody's role, the rules of the road. If somebody would become incapacitated or pass away, how do they get bought out, at what price? But an operating agreement, shareholders agreement, or members agreement in an LLC would define all the rules of the road for the new family entity or family members that own the business. And then employment agreements, I think, are very critical as well. So everybody knows their role as far as if they're employees, what they have to do day to day to collect their salary and their compensation package. Because ownership and employment are mutually exclusive. You don't have to be an owner to be an employee and vice versa. So each of these needs to be defined very clearly and minimize false expectations and unspoken expectations. But the shareholders agreement would govern the transference. I'm sorry, the asset purchase or stock purchase agreement would govern the transference. The operating agreement would govern the business activities of the new entity, and the employment agreements would govern what people do on a day-to-day basis.
And those agreements would be where you would prevent things like, brother gets divorced, and his spouse who's now part of the family. Yeah. That's where all of that would be handled in advance.
Correct.
Okay.
That's true. There's also something called family business policies, which are separate from legal documents. Alan's very correct in everything that he said, but you can also, if you're in the family business consulting arena, one knows that there's going to be certain issues that are going to arise. For example, let's say children take over a business, and some of them may want their children eventually to enter the business. And that's a known thing that can happen. That's not usually something that's handled by the documents that Alan talked about. So before that happens, you can brainstorm with family members and decide, hey, when our children who are now 10 years old hit their 20s, for example, and maybe they want to come into the business and maybe they don't want to come into the business. But for those who do, what are our requirements going to be? Do we want them to go to college? Do we want them to have 5 years of business experience before they come to the business? Are we going to make a job for that family member, or in order for them to get a job in the family business, do we have to have one available? So you sit around and you talk and you decide what are our family values that we want to incorporate into a family policy. And then together, hopefully before there's a problem, you agree on what the ground rules are, just as an example, for when Susie, who's 10, gets out of college and maybe wants to join the business. How are they going to be compensated? So that everybody knows these are the ground rules for a family member to join the business. If you set the ground rules and you set the expectations, it's also kind of an out for the parent. When Susie's ready to join, and wants to do so right out of high school, the parents, the uncle, the aunt, they can say, 20
Here's
years
the
ago,
policy.
20 years ago, we decided that before you become eligible to work for this business, you have to have college degree if that's one of the things that's important to your family. If it's, you have to have some kind of trade school, then that's the family policy. You have to have trade school. But it's all foreseeing what can happen in the future and trying to prevent problems.
We've had multiple families go through CEL that could have benefited from a family policy document.
Yeah.
Multiple. I can
Well,
think of a
because
few.
sometimes it's going to solve the problem of somebody either feeling entitled or like it's not fair or having to ask an uncomfortable question. If there's a policy, I would think that those are conversations that, to your point, happened before it was a problem instead of after.
I'm directly thinking of examples over time where I've heard of people wanting to have more control over the companies too soon, and the parents not wanting to give that up, and conversely, the parents holding on for too long. So I see how documents like that could be really useful to point to a third party and not have it just be the emotions of the people involved.
Right. Instead of ad hoc decision making when emotion is injected, it's prior to the emotional problem where people are sitting around much more calm and cool-headed and discussing how they want to see this take place 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. And it's all, different families are going to do different things. There's no cookie cutter policy for a family. It's based on their values at the time. And so you figure out what those are, what are the shared values, and how are we going to document this for the future so that everyone can use it sometimes as a sword, I guess, other times as a shield, but it's there and it's been agreed to in advance.
Yeah, I guess I never really thought about the policy manual.
100%.
And always thinking
Yeah,
about the
that's a great
contracts. But
suggestion.
I mean, you have an employee manual that covers these
Right.
kinds of things for your employees. Why not for your family? That makes a ton of
I've
sense.
I've had one where it was two brothers who owned a business, and the one brother was always worried that the other brother who was in charge could withhold dividend distributions if he wanted to. And so we had a policy that we figured out ahead of time about how dividends are going to be distributed, what amounts, so that the brother who didn't have as much control as the other had some, I guess, traction in securing a dividend distribution that they had agreed to ahead of time. If certain conditions were made, there would be a dividend distribution.
So that it didn't seem it was being withheld because of a fight that had nothing to do with the business, right?
Right.
Hearing that sounds terrible.
Somebody beat somebody,
yeah.
Being right.
My brother and sister, I get along very well, but I would not want to have a situation where they could withhold money from me for some reason or another.
Yeah, then you find out who your family is.
Right?
Thanks.
It does happen, then that's what business divorce litigation, that's how it seeds and begins, which is something that I've done for 30 years. And you see those fights happen often, unfortunately.
Where they might start out aligned, but then as they grow or the business grows, things change.
Yeah.
I've worked with multiple businesses where the brothers or siblings divorce themselves of each other over a business issue. Now, this family split because of a business issue that didn't address these opportunities to create structure or work through the transition or problems that they had within the business. It's really sad.
Yeah, because here you
Really
had
sad to
this,
see.
this extra legacy that a lot of families don't have, but it actually tore the family apart. Just sad.
You will often see brothers or sisters, siblings, let's say, getting along great for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years.
That was my last question. Yeah.
Something along the way, something bad happens, and then there's a falling out. Many times, my experience has been one sibling thinks he or she's doing all the work, or most of the work,
Yes.
and the other sibling's in Florida.
Yeah.
You see that a lot.
Wow.
So
the
there's-
policy manual, how often you can go to Florida?
well, you can develop policies
Work at
around
least.
those types of things.
Yeah.
The problem is most people don't do that work.
Yeah. So, Alan, I want to go to you with some of your experience that you've had. I can think of a few businesses you've worked with, but can you describe a situation without specifics about a founder who really struggled maybe to transition the leadership, and what's a takeaway we could learn from that?
Yeah, one that came through our CEL program. This was economically driven. The father was very concerned about getting enough value for his own personal balance sheet that he could afford to live the lifestyle that he's used to in his retirement years. And he came to me and said, if I don't get full sticker for my kids, we're taking it to market and we're going to find a third-party buyer for the business. I'm like, whoa, okay, that's what we're going to do. And it was a very adversarial relationship between the children and the father because he was taking this economic position. The kids felt he was being greedy and oppressive, and both children really wanted the business, and both children were very qualified to take the business. One from the business side, one from the operations side. It was a wonderful split. And over time, we had to bring down the expectations of the father. We brought on a financial advisor to work through, do you have enough, right? And then we got to what an enterprise value would have to be for him to live his comfortable lifestyle. And we realized that there was a delta between market value and what he really needed to get out of it to be comfortable in his golden years. And that simmered everybody down. We got to the middle. We transacted the business at a discount off of full market value of the business. But in this particular case, it was the expectation without awareness of his personal balance sheet or his financial planner in the context of what I need to sell my business for. That was a big problem with the business, but we got around it by bringing, again, professionals to the table.
And are they speaking now?
Yes, they have Thanksgiving, Christmas, all the holidays.
Okay,
it's
all right,
wonderful.
we're all good.
Yeah.
All right.
Just to make sure I'm understanding that correctly, you brought in a financial advisor who basically said, if you take this to market, you're not going to get what you need anyway.
No, we could have gotten a very handsome.
Oh, you would? Okay.
Oh, no, they left 7 figures on the table by selling to family.
Oh, wow, okay.
But all he and his wife, for him and his wife's lifestyle, was to be able to enjoy the same lifestyle they had with the business income that they were enjoying.
Okay. So you found an optimal part there.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
They never did the math of saying
Right.
how much is enough on my balance
Right.
sheet at what annual rate of return. They used 7 or 8%, and they did their financial thing.
Yeah.
So you found a price that they could sell to their kids for that could maintain the lifestyle.
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And was significantly discounted from what market could have been for the business.
And the relationship.
Right.
Preserve the
Ultimately,
relationship.
the goal of it, absolutely,
Right.
was to keep
Yeah,
Christmas
those
and
kids
Thanksgiving
would
together.
feel pretty
I mean,
awful
could you
down the road.
imagine if they just sold that business
Yeah.
without having that
Oh my
conversation
God, there would never be
and the
Thanksgiving.
the family's broken up, the business, the legacy lost? I mean, that's
Oh, we could have sold that quickly to a private equity or strategic buyer for sure, but the right thing happened.
So, Joe, I want to come to you. When you're working with these, so you've got the, whatever generations in front of you in the room, and they're ready to focus on either creating the policy manual or having these difficult conversations. How do you get the emotion out? Like, how do you get it to where those meetings aren't a screaming match pointing to the scar on their forehead, but they're productive? Like, what tools do you use?
I usually start with private discussions with each family member about the various topics that are in play and try to figure out, take their temperature, what do they think, what are the seeds of discord, if any, what are their concerns, and you can find alignments relatively quickly usually. And when you have open communication that's direct and you're not sweeping things under the rug, which is a huge problem in family businesses where conversations are just swept under the rug, and you have a set of guidelines in place in terms of what the communication rules are going to be. That's very helpful. Whenever I do one of these family meetings, there's a rule which is I can put someone in. I call it timeout, which maybe I should come up with a better word for it. But where if someone's getting a little too heated, I will say, listen, please keep your thoughts to yourself for 5 minutes. And that will usually get people to reflect, calm down, and be able to have an exchange it's going to still have emotion, but it's not going to be a destructive emotion, hopefully. And if I'm hearing destructive emotion, I'll ask them to continue to be in a timeout. And so I grow very close with these businesses. Sometimes I'm at the family birthday party. I'm seen as, a very important part of the business and everybody's ally. So it's rare when someone will snap at me. They'll maybe snap at a family member pretty easily, but not so much at me. And, we're able to manage things and build.
So having you in the room is kind of diffusing things, right? Because they're maybe not going to be as unreasonable as they might without an outsider.
Yeah, I mean, I can either diffuse things, or I've been in situations where I know the children want to talk about something with their father, for example, and you can see them pull back because it's just so hard. And so I can ask questions that are designed to pull out of the children what I know they want to talk about. Or if that's still too hard for them, I'll just put it out there and we'll start talking about it. So I think it's, multiple ways to facilitate communication to make it easier, because it is hard. It's hard talking to your boss about these types of things, but if your boss is also your parent, it makes it that much more difficult.
You have a very calming presence about you. I was very nervous coming in here, just talking to you. I'm like, very calm.
Well, thanks. Tell my kids that. Will you tell my kids that?
Ellen, I think I'm guessing that you've probably had this situation, but I'm curious for both of your viewpoints, because I hear this one a lot. Family business, I think you mentioned this, somebody's not performing. How do you address those conversations? So maybe I'm the boss and my sibling is just loafing, or maybe I'm not the boss and I feel like the family member's taking advantage of their perspective or their position. How do you deal with that, or how do you encourage people to deal with it?
Great question. I think there's one paramount response, and that's third-party facilitation. You cannot talk to your sibling or your parent or anybody else in the family logically, unemotionally about a topic like this. You need to bring in a third-party facilitator to have those hard discussions and hear both sides, right? There's two sides to every story. The truth is somewhere in the middle. Really discern that and then try to diffuse the problem and create alternatives, options, and solutions for the family.
I've actually, I have had a client, they don't think they need me anymore, so I guess that's good. But I had a client in the Capital District, it was a large construction company, and it was a father who had Parkinson's who left the business to his two children. One was a real go-getter, the other was less so. And he was found multiple times by workers sleeping in his truck. So I had a conversation with him about that, and he said to me, Joe, I just don't want to do this. This isn't me. I don't want to do it. And I don't want to be in this business. I don't enjoy it. And that's how that one resolved. We figured out a way to exit him from the business where there was no bad feelings. And so sometimes non-performance is just not interested. And you don't know those things until you've sat down.
It's not the symptom.
Right.
It's the cause behind it. It's
right.
An issue.
So this time we've been talking, I've been thinking about situations where someone wants more than they maybe deserve at the time, but the opposite thing, they can feel pressure, like they're supposed to step up into this business, or my father wants me to do this, so I have to do it. And providing the out could be a real relief to some people.
Sure. I think that's true. I've seen that a couple times. So having the conversation, the private conversation, sometimes you hear things that are very much a relief valve for the problem.
Third-party facilitator has a very significant advantage because the honesty and transparency and the walls go down, right? They're far more open to people like us when they're talking about what their issues are and how to find solutions. So we can hear the honesty and then from a perspective of experience, propose solutions for the problem at that point.
So when you're talking to the generation, mom, dad, whoever that is the one looking to transition out, how should somebody approach that when their identity for so long has been as that business owner? Like, I mean, I guess it's a question for any of us, right, as we look at retirement or whatever it is. But how do you help them leave? How do you help them feel good about transitioning that process or the company to whether it's their children, their siblings, whatever it is?
For people who have that mindset, and there's many, maybe most, I try to get them to understand that their ability to transition the job, the asset, the business is all part of that identity, and that if they don't do it successfully and they want to just keep holding on to the reins, that could end in something bad for the business. And so that the identity becomes not just running it, but making sure that it can transition smoothly to children. Because that's the biggest problem I think that we see is parents who run a very successful business who just aren't ready to give up because their identity is wrapped up in this business. And oftentimes they want to continue the heroism of being the support for the whole family. But there's also a lot of heroism in making sure that they can transition it before either something really bad happens to them or before there's discord. I went away with one of my clients, and we were on a trip together, and I had said to him, he was only in his mid-50s, and I said to him, what's going to happen if something bad happens to you? And he said to me, nothing bad's going to happen to me.
Oh boy!
And I said,
only,
well,
right?
let's hope nothing bad, but let's figure that out. And we did figure it out. Unfortunately, like 3 or 4 years later, he passed away, and we had, very unexpectedly and very sadly. But the business, which is a large construction company, was able to still thrive in his absence because he thought about what's going to happen in case I'm not here, but he needed a push to think about those things. And sometimes it takes, all the time, I think it takes a trusted ally to get people to think about those catastrophic events that we all know happen and we all hope don't happen to us, right, or our family.
I really like what you said, though, about having the founder or whatever generation is transitioning out think about the fact that how they transition is part of their legacy, and that should be part of their identity. It's kudos and credit to them for having a smooth transition in a company that can succeed without them.
Right.
Where I think in the back of your mind you kind of hope it can't do as well without you as it did with you, because that's part of your ego and identity. But in reality, for anybody, whether they're transitioning to family or to whoever buys their business or, employees, if you've created a great process, great systems, great team, and it runs great without you, that's your job. That's like when our kids can do fine without us when they leave the nest. That's what we want, right?
A child who needs the parent hasn't done a great job, right? And in the same way, in a family business, if the children can't run the family business without the patriarch or the matriarch, then maybe the matriarch and patriarch haven't done such a great job.
Yeah, that's great to think that way.
When I first meet people that are transitioning out, in our early discussions, I try to discern, and I'll ask the question, in your exit, are you primarily focused on economics or legacy? Most, interestingly enough, focus on legacy more than economics. But the ones that are economics, then it becomes quite simple, right? But the legacy component, to Joe's point exactly, you'd have to, you're part of this, right? We have to start that component. If you want a successful legacy, the brand, the name, success for your children, whatever that legacy breaks down into components, to actually exist post your transition out, we need to start on this now and get started on this. Legacy is the focus for sure.
Wow. And Western New York has so many great legacy family businesses. I mean, it's amazing to see how many we've made.
We've talked a lot in the past about third generation of a business passing down being trouble zone. That's really problematic.
Less than 20% succeed?
Yeah, about 20%.
Why? What about that first transition is so much better than the second transition out? So like the second generation of the business, I don't know the success rate on that because we've always talked about the third one being the problem. But what is the success rate of a second generation business by comparison, and why is it so much easier? Because of that?
I think it's about 70%.
Okay.
And I think about 70% of second generation businesses, if I have my statistics right, they can do okay. And the reason why it's such a downward spiral into the third generation is because the complexity increases. So at the first generation, you have the founder. The founder gets to decide whatever the founder wants, right? Then maybe you have a child or two who's involved in the business. So now the complexity increases by that much. And then by the third generation, now could have grandchildren, nieces, nephews, cousins. And so there's all these different relationships that are going on. And I think it's that complexity that causes increased problems. And also just some people don't want to do what we're saying is a good idea, which is think about succession. And the failure to think about succession can cause expectations to be unrealized, and that's a bad thing for children, nieces, nephews. They all are in the business. They're not just there for a paycheck. They're there because they're building it too. And so they have expectations, and those expectations have to either be met or at minimally told that they're not going to be met for whatever reason there may be. So sometimes, I'm not saying that everybody gets what they want all the time. That may not be so. But to tell somebody that you're not going to be the leader because, whatever the because is, can be just as effective in erasing or reducing strife than anything that I've ever seen. Just honesty. Does it hurt? Can it hurt that person? Yes. Is it hard to hear? Yes. But they've heard it, and they can come to terms with it most of the time. And if they can't, well, then they say, well, maybe I need to go do something different. But it gives the people an opportunity to make choices when you have direct, transparent conversation with them.
I think there's a second component to that is first generation, they start the business, they have a passion for something. Many times businesses are started out of the fires of passion. And so the business starts and grows to a certain size from the passion of that owner. Second generation, see that passion, maybe have some of that passion in their bloodstream. So that continuance of the passion and that type of business goes for a second generation. But the odds of that passion and the desire for this to be the way I live and breathe as an ownership position needs to be, to hit the third generation, I think it's just diluted, right? Many third generations say, I don't want to run the family business. I want to go and get my doctorate or whatever the case is, right? There's interest, and on top of that, the business grows from zero to sizable to maybe significantly sizable. Maybe they can't step into that position. A business gets to a certain size, they need professional management. They need people with MBAs and work experience to step in and lead something like this. Or maybe the liquidation at the second generation and create a trust fund where they get an economic push to their PhD. Makes a lot more sense for a family than actually taking that business owner. But the ones that try to do it, I think that's why 80% don't work out due to lack of passion and just not planning smart. Can they really run a business that's grown through two generations to a really significant business?
Well, and there's something to be said for when you're the founder and you're the one who's, done the sleepless nights and the 100-hour work weeks to build something with that passion. And then, sometimes there's an entitlement feel when you're the second or the third where, it's just already great. So you're not feeling that same grind, and then things can take a turn.
This has been a great explanation of that because I've always thought it was, not to be cast, an entitlement thing like you said, or just it's always been there and they don't take it seriously. But the fundamental understanding of it's just way more complicated. There's so many more people involved, or the business could be so big that you can't just walk into it. Makes a lot of sense. That's cool.
Yeah. Well, we are out of time. This has been a great conversation. I think we could have quite a few more hours in this conversation, but I want to leave us with a final question. So I'm listening to this podcast. I'm in a family business, and I know there's issues, okay? Maybe we haven't talked about this, or maybe we haven't talked about it as much as we should. What's the first step I should take today, to improve the chance of success for my business?
I call them small G talks, small governance talks, where you just start to have the conversations with your family members that you really don't want to have because they're difficult. It's just like a sport. The more you practice it, the easier it becomes. So I would suggest to people that they start having the difficult conversations calmly, transparently, and respectfully, instead of allowing the invisible elephant to just stay in the room.
And I'm going to talk from clearly the owner's perspective, all the owners that are watching. These are really hard conversations that we said repeatedly today. Maybe start having the conversations with your trusted advisors. When you own a business and you've been around for a long time, your accountant, your attorney, your financial advisor, these people become, like Joe's talked about, he becomes friends with his clients. I become friends with my clients. You become a trusted advisor. Have these discussions with your trusted advisors, maybe first. Get comfortable with it. Get some details that you can specifically talk about and get your head around it, but start the communication as early as you possibly can. But don't deny it, right? The legacy component, if that's your desire for your business, it's your best interest to start the communication as early as possible. And you can beta test it with your trusted advisors you already have.
Wow, this is great. Well, Joe and Alan, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your insights. This topic is very personal, but it's also very strategic, so we appreciate your lived experiences. So family businesses can be extraordinary legacies, but they require some intentional planning, some clear communication, and most importantly, the guidance of some trusted advisors. So if you're listening and thinking that it may be time to start having some crucial conversations, consider this your nudge. You're on record now. It's time. If you've enjoyed this episode, follow the show. Please leave us a review. Share it with another business owner, anybody who's navigating these family dynamics. I'm Susan Steffen, and this has been Incorporate. Until next time, keep learning, keep building, and keep planning for the future of your business.